Dan started off by saying that where we are in terms of being in the post-normal science, and the challenge there is that although our understanding is sort of moved in that synthetic reality, the way we govern is still very analytic. So part of the problem that we ran into when we tried to address, okay, so how do we address these problems where we actually need to step out of that explicit, more data, more information kind of universe to more engaged kind of space. So one of the things that is that, this is what we tend to do, is that we think that if we are, one, we produce more data and we explain ourselves even more, somehow, we will have a better connection, better agreement with the public at large. But then if you take the case of climate change, what happens is that, we've been producing a lot more information, a lot more data, a lot more graphs, a lot more sophisticated models, but the decision making, it seems to be driven by something else. So there's this disconnect. So one of the natural tendency in that, next slide, is to think that, okay, if we could figure out what public opinion is, and then if we kind of try to address that, then we can come at the same place. So this is a study about NASA, about public opinion, and as you can see, the most prominent thing that comes out that the public think about NASA is TAN. And so the natural tendency is, no, if we could just tell NASA, next slide please, no, that's not what NASA does. NASA does this things, and this is how NASA benefits you and society, then they will come into agreement. So there was this kind of argument made, especially towards the end of the Bush administration, that if we address the problem of scientific illiteracy in this country, we'll have more agreement in terms of complex scientific decisions. But when we look at the research, people who do science communication research, they have actually found out that scientific illiteracy actually accounts for a very small percentage of how public form their opinion. Next. It's values, ideology, partisanship, and those kind of things weigh in more in terms of their decision making. So no matter, we can keep pumping more data and more information and make it more understandable, but the kind of impact we're thinking about having is not really happening, because again, there's a value frame that people use when they're interpreting, data, information, complexity, trade-offs. And so we need to sort of think about how we can do it differently. So we need to think about different models. Next slide, please. So the first slide is what we tend to do. It's in science communication mainly. We basically mean that it's a problem of knowledge, that there's a deficit, that we can fill in, and once people know what scientists know, there'll be agreement. But again, this is not how things are happening as people looking into the problem. And what we see is not just one-way communication, it's also listening. And then that engagement, that interaction in terms of what, question to ask. We think, the scientists tend to think that we know what question needs to be answered, and those are the answers we provide. But the public may be looking for different questions, and the only way to know that is to create these kind of exchange, these platforms where we can have those ideas. So, I'm not going to go into a lot of that, but just to recognize that there are two models. There's a deficit model, how we have sort of tended to do, popularize science, make it understandable, dumb it down. But what we do in the process of dumbing it down is that we sort of lose the complexity that actually is embedded in all these problems. And by dumbing it down, we actually create more problem, because then people ask questions, oh, you told me this is how it was going to happen, it didn't happen. So the trust is again broken. So next slide, please. And the other thing is, whenever we're talking about decisions, even like a nuclear repository or building a nuclear plant, this sort of things takes a long time to actually happen. So just convincing the public right now or getting their buy-in is no guarantee that we'll be able to see this process to its natural end. So, we sort of have to think of these scientific decisions in terms of the social context. And we need to sort of understand that the future that's going to, the problems is also going to evolve. And if we don't build that capacity, sort of engage to change direction, change course, we will not, get to where we need to go, and we will have kind of this kind of a situation where, we have a kind of stasis in the political side, and the scientists can't figure out how to, what kind of information to give to sort of break that status quo. So, so basically, we need to think about more, not just, Dan talked about good enough, not just the future, but what are all the plausible futures? What are all the alternatives? And if we can sort of create that capacity, so once that one future where we were sort of banking on doesn't happen, we can naturally adjust to the other ones that are equally plausible. And next slide, please. So we actually, there was an RFI put out by NASA with the asteroid initiative, and it asked for, about partnership and in public engagement. And we sort of, this was a sort of CSPO's, Consortium for Science Policy and Outcomes recommendation. We basically said that, the grander challenge is not this asteroid mission, but the grander challenge is how do we kind of get the disengaged public. What happens is whenever NASA has public hearing or invites comments, you always have a very enthused response. But outside of that, there is the public who still thinks that all NASA does is 10. So that, how do you bring them into the conversation? That is the grander challenge. And for that, we said we need to think about more engagement model rather than public understanding model. And the thing is that, this is a kind of a governance framework we talk about, is that make it anticipatory governance. Not going to talk a lot about that. But the other critical thing that is happening is that while science is, where our governance has not caught up, but there are some development in other fields, especially in the social sciences, in the informal science education and the science communication sphere, where there's tremendous opportunity from where we can, if we could try to leverage those, we could actually create this dialogue and engagement throughout the society to tackle, not only climate change and other kind of problems, energy security and healthcare and so forth. So again, this was our proposal. I'm not going to go through that. Next slide, please. Again, so these are the three developments that are actually happening. That's worth talking. I talked about the transition in the informal science community, where you're shifting from public understanding model to a public engagement model. The museums are really at the forefront of this revolution. So they're actually changing from their emphasis on exhibit to something like how we can create the museum, which seems like a neutral convening ground for people to come and have conversation about this complex societal issue. The other thing is in the technology assessment community, where we know the Office of Technology Assessment has been gone, but the whole TA capability, when it went to Europe, they sort of added a part of what they call participatory. So there has been tremendous actual practice and model development in Europe. Surrounding the idea of participatory technology assessment, and there's been a lot of and that has meshed with our effort with deliberative democracy.